I used to beat myself up about that a lot when I was like kind of, I guess like finding my voice is probably the best place to put it. The only way I ever managed to get past that was instead of trying to compare what I was doing to like my peers or to artists that I aspired to, I just sort of had to step back and just be like, yeah, it's like the point is not to be them. The point is I have to be myself, and it's going to take time for that to present itself. And the only way that will happen is by kind of collecting all of these different influences and taking inspiration and taking lessons from a million different places and not just one.
I did a talk the other day.
Watch me immediately become uncomfortable.
I'm just going to pump your tires and make you feel really awkward.
Yeah.
That's what I do on this podcast.
Sorry, I'll do it as well.
I did a talk with, do you know, have you heard of the Design Kids?
Yes.
Yeah, I did a talk a couple of weeks ago. And in my head, I never want to discourage anyone from doing anything, right? Like it's more like, you know, the lessons that I can teach you is just through my experiences.
Totally.
And I did not do everything right. I did most of the things.
Well, that's the point,
wrong.
right? If you think you're doing everything right, that's usually when things are about to go catastrophically wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And
or you're probably just not going to learn anything, go anywhere.
You're not pushing yourself enough.
Yeah.
So I was explaining to them I made every wrong decision and failed up. I think so anyway. I mean, that's anyway, besides the point.
Nah, that's totally
what I wanted to explain to them was just, you know, they were asking freelance and full-time pros and cons, because I was flip-flopping between, like, I kind of work in 3-year cycles, I found.
Yeah, right.
So 3 years freelance before I've had enough and for whatever reason, and then go to full-time, get sick of that. And a lot of that just came from not feeling grounded, and not doing it not doing the right way. What I mean by the right way was not having the resilience involved to stick it out. Yeah. So for young people, I think that they're going to find it challenging to ride it out, because I think that they've just kind of been promised something that doesn't exist.
Well, you see, I think I've definitely thought about that a lot over the years, because same thing as you, when you sent me the, just sort of the initial email going, hey, this is what we usually talk about. And specifically, I think it was in context of what you just said, failing upwards. And the thing that sort of I started thinking of then was just going, it's like a career is built by navigating eras. You're going to go through phases when you're completely fixated on one particular thing, or you're working in-house, or you're working with a particular client, or you're doing a specific style, and that is going to change over time, and that you're supposed to do that. And that's the thing you learn after 10, 15 years. But when you're coming out of school, there's no way in hell you're going to know that.
No.
But it's terrifying.
But they don't even tell you that. They don't tell you.
Well, when you're in school, you're only told to make a decision, and you're told to make a decision, and this is going to be the rest of your fucking life.
Yeah.
And which is completely unrealistic. So it's cool that that's the thing that you were imparting to them, especially through the context of that work, is there are different facets to how this works, and there are different things that you're going to take away from it. And there are different, there might even be different failures within, but you're going to learn something throughout it. And also, especially if you're working on things where there are different disciplines involved within it, and understanding craft, understanding marketing, understanding, any of those bits and pieces, you're going to find something that you enjoy. And when you collect enough of those things, that's when you start finding your path. So imparting that onto people is cool, always a cool thing.
Yeah, what I was imparting were the things that I should have known that I didn't. The lessons that the challenges that I had, I didn't accept them as lessons. I just took them as roadblocks. Where now I can
Like
look
in what
back.
way?
Well, I think that, let's say if we were to look at the work that you've done as a juxtaposition.
How dare you put this back on me?
As a juxtaposition, is
Yeah.
that you have allowed yourself to evolve. And as you were saying that, things are going to be working in these eras, and then you kind of move along and you grow and you evolve along with that.
Yeah.
Where I didn't allow for that. Every time when
Right.
things were starting to shift, there was this resistance for the change, which is just ridiculous, right?
Like how did that resistance present itself?
It was more of I guess, inadequacy.
Mm-hmm.
There was always this feeling of shortcoming. And, the whole imposter syndrome, not good enough, the cliches, all that, right?
The burden of every creative.
Yeah, so I think that, it's those that can accept it and just go with it, or those that react to it, and I reacted to it, and that's kind of why I jumped ship so many times.
Yeah. I've done that too, though. Like, I've jumped ship. Like, when it, hit points where I've just been like, nah, this is just not working anymore. And I think it wasn't necessarily from a fatigue or a point of not, like, maybe not. Sorry, hang on. I phrased that poorly. Not necessarily from a standpoint of, oh, this is frustrating, I'm just butting my head against a wall, therefore I'm going to go and try something else. I think it's more when you, I don't know, like, do you find this as well? Like, if you do find yourself butting up against something repeatedly, like after you've been like working in a certain discipline or something for a long time, like, do you find that if you start butting up against it continually, then it's, all right, it's time to, like, move over here and try something else? Or is it...
Probably not the
or is
budding.
it like, fuck this shit. Like, no, I'm done. Like,
it was. It's a good question. I'm just trying to think of particular instances. The butting up against things, I don't mind. I kind of like that challenge. I suppose is when I've never really considered this. I think I think it's that challenge that I do like, but now I'm trying to look retrospectively with this new lens, right? Which is different. It just shifts the context of what things were like. But where there was this sense of inferiority and inadequacy, I choked and I buckled in those instances and just thought, and instead of just thinking, okay, well, here's an opportunity for you to overcome to then level up.
Yeah.
I just saw some of those opportunities as like, I'm not good enough. And I think that a lot of it, and to tie it back into a conversation that we had earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like some of the
I apologize
artists,
in advance for taking you on the ADHD
this
journey.
is how we're going to do it. This is how this conversation is going to go.
Yeah.
But like, there are particular artists where, like, let's just say, for example, Ken Taylor.
Yep.
Or Dan Mumford as well, right? They're the goats of that particular,
Absolutely.
that poster illustration style. I would look at that, take inspiration from it, and then think, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And then that was it. That was just my immediate thought. I'm never going to get there. Instead of applying the thinking of, it took them a whole lifetime to get there. They're dangling a carrot in front of you.
Yeah.
Go through the motions. The only difference between you and the person that you're aspiring to be is time. Right? It's time and effort.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there was always this urgency to get to a place that I wanted to get to, not having the patience, and then bailing because I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So
I know exactly what you mean. Hey, like, and that was definitely something I used to beat myself up about a lot. Like when I was, I don't know, like first half of my career, at least. Like, just, like you named two artists who I, when I was starting out, I still love their work, but I was like, obviously super inspired by both of those guys. I love that you mentioned Dan Mumford, because I was talking with someone about the artwork. Oh God, was it? I've forgotten the band. Oh no, I can picture the art, but I can't remember the band. Gallows. He did this awesome cover art for Gallows. I think on their first record, it's it's like two sharks and ships, but he's got such a unique way of doing his line work and the colors and everything like that. It's always stayed with me a lot. But anyway, going back to what we were talking about, which was like, yeah, I used to beat myself up about that a lot when I was like kind of, I guess like finding my voice is probably the best place to put it. Because and the only way I ever managed to get past that was instead of trying to compare what I was doing to like my peers or to artists that I aspired to, I just sort of had to step back and just be like, yeah, it's like the point is not to be them. The point is I have to be myself, and it's going to take time for that to present itself. And the only way that will happen is by kind of collecting all of these different influences and taking inspiration and taking lessons from a million different places and not just one. Like it's always good to have like that's like this came up recently actually, like because I don't collect stuff like physical things. I don't take a lot of stuff with me. I've been accused of living kind of Spartan in that regard sometimes, but I kind of collect artists that I like. So like some of the best advice I ever got when I was at TAFE, because like that's sort of where I started studying. I went to TAFE out in Dandenong, and one of our teachers, I think it was our illustration teachers, was just like, all right, so today you're just going to go on the internet and just find stuff you like.
Oh, yeah,
and
man.
You're going to make a folder on your desktop because, we'd all sign in to we'd have our own sign-ins and whatever. And you're going to have a folder on your desktop and you're just going to call it inspiration. And you start just filling it with shit you like. And that is the best advice that I ever got. So like, that's been like, it's been like Tarzo's for me. Like I have this folder that I've had literally since I started, like since I was studying, that has gone from computer to hard drive to cloud.
Right.
And it's filled with everything that I've ever liked, which is such a cool time capsule. And it's still, and like, like part of the process of every job is, like first thing you do, like start writing down notes, start doing thumbnails, do mood boards, like do research and see if you can find things that sort of trigger something. And then you start grabbing all the bits and pieces of the recipe and throw it into the pot, and then you get your own thing. Like that's
exactly
you
how
get your own
that's
art,
how it
your
goes.
style, you get your voice, you get your piece, whatever. But like, yeah, like I don't know, it's such like that's yeah. I'm so glad that I started doing that. Like, because like I started researching. Like you asked me if I was still doing music stuff, and like I started doing. I started on an album yesterday, which I'm like really like super pumped to work on, because I think like I had to for a really long time. Most of what I did was album artwork. Like I'd say like 85% of the work that I did for around about 10 years was just album artwork, and it was mostly like photography based stuff, like Photoshop based stuff, and all that sort of thing. And this project is going to be photo based as well. And I haven't been able to do something like this in like 3 years, and fuck, I've missed it, man. Like, sorry, I just spat everywhere. I fucking missed it. Like, I'm really, really pumped to like start on this thing. But like part of it was like going, okay, cool, I got to get my head back around this. So I had to. We started talking about it maybe a month ago, and I've only just now been able to start it. So I sort of had it, was able to go back yesterday and see some notes that I wrote down and see some of the references that I started pulling from the cupboard and just getting my head back around that. And like, that's been like super exciting to sort of get back into.
And you can also just take that back to your previous point about just collecting ideas and collecting concepts. You can even look at it more from a macro lens.
Yeah.
And all the things that you're engaging with around you at any moment, right? And just you get to choose almost what you want to be inspired by. Like if you're consciously active in being present, you can engage all your five senses at any moment, and then you can also think about like, how does this serve me? And like you as a visual person, you're probably the same when you're just looking at fucking everything and breaking down all the lines, the shapes, the colors, all of it, almost neurotically, and just trying to figure out. I would look at every single
habitually,
poster,
subconsciously, obsessively.
Yeah. Like you would look at a poster and try to break down the design elements in that, and then you can even then almost literally peel the layers back and just see the textures
Yeah.
Right. And then you look at it all that, you're like, oh, what's there? There's something like happening organically here. And you get to choose what you want to inspire you.
Completely, yeah. And I think it like that is kind of the nice thing about being multidisciplinary is like depending on where you're living, like what sort of wheelhouse you're living in at the time, you're subconsciously curating what you let in. So it's like for exactly what you were just talking about, like say with posters and like sort of peeling back things about and spotting things like like when you're talking about that, I'm like in my brain it's going, oh, like I'm thinking about it's like how I look at things. I'll look at a poster and I'll look at the composition and I'll look at textures used in the background or like silhouettes and like using color placement and then typography and things like that. And for the first half of this year, I like almost all of the work that I was doing was branding and typography based, like lots and lots of custom typography, and so much of it will never see the light of day, which is kind of a bummer because there was a lot of shit I loved. But while I was working on all that, it was. I had a little moment, like just sort of kicking around this area, like in Fitzroy, where I was kind of like just going to like walking from place to place to meet some friends, and I was just looking around at like just all the signage and that, and looking in, and I had spent so much time that week just obsessing over shape language and letter forms.
Oh, and you see it everywhere.
And and that's all I was seeing that at that particular moment. So it's like, and it particularly struck me because I remember when I started studying, and I was, again, like particularly drawn to typography at that time. And I started getting introduced to all the different fonts that you could and where you could get them, and like just sort of the basics of like how to do your craft. And it just broke it. like all of a sudden, like the world looked completely different. I was like, I know what these things are. Like this is that font. This is that font. Like that's that Pantone color.
Yeah,
that's that thing. Like like you just sort of fill and over time you fill your brain with so much that eventually you lose sight of that, and that's when things become stale.
Yep, they can, and then you have to, in a way, like force yourself out of that regiment
completely.
Well. There are times, and that's the thing, right? Like especially,
like for me, it's always been hopping, like discipline hopping, like because it was partially a thing. So like when I was doing like just the album artwork, I was doing like quite a like up to like 16 albums a year, which was quite a lot for me. But as part of that, because I can't do photography for every single one.
You do the photography as well?
No, no. When I started out, I would do the photography. It was very basic, and I learned very quickly that I can't do everything, which was, I'm so glad I learned that lesson early on. Which doesn't necessarily mean I've always remembered it. I will still try to do everything. but yeah, no, like photography was one of those things I learned very quickly. Just like this is a very specific discipline, and it's an art form unto itself. And there are things like I know what I want to communicate, and I think like pulling influence from outside of your discipline is something that I learned early as well, purely just from being a huge fucking movie nerd. So I would be able to, I knew I could communicate what I wanted. I knew I could communicate the lighting and the composition of these things, but I had I could not
actually
do
set
it myself.
Yeah.
And, and then, like I've been able to work with so many awesome photographers that way. And like that's one of my favorite things to be able to do as well. But like, it was a lesson I learned very early on. It's like, no, I will stand here and I will do the art director point and do these things like that. But then like try to work with people who are extremely talented in their own discipline, and then also allow them room to contribute something that I may not see as well, which is always cool.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's just, it is that fusion when you bring in two experts in their respective fields. When they come together, they're going to create and just coalesce and create something that is just more powerful or is more impactful than just one singular thing. Like Voltron,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my go-to, right?
Yeah.
Like it's always just like Voltron. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, and it has the fucking sword. Like,
But no, when you say like, hang on.
I was gonna flip it back on you for a sec because you were telling me that you've started painting again, like doing some experimenting and that stuff too.
And yes, back to doing all of that painting. I hadn't painted in 15, almost 20 years.
It had been that fucking long.
Yeah, well, because I just had a really bad relationship with painting because when I was painting at the time, it was just angst fueled, right? Like it was just a time in my life where it was for me to just get that out. So my relationship with painting was always it was negative because I was just feeling these negative emotions, putting it down, and it was just heightening that. So I just didn't actually enjoy it. Like I guess it was just more like and that was it. I just didn't enjoy it because it just made me feel shit.
Yeah, right.
So I stepped away from it, and it was again that fear of that inadequacy. It's like how do I get to that level? How do I get to that standard? And the answer is like just fucking paint more. But I didn't want to do it because I just didn't feel good about doing it. But no, like it was
that can happen though. That can happen, and it's such a contradiction as well because like it's that classic adage where it's like pain creates the best art, which is like kind of a bullshit thing to say, but there is an unfortunately large amount of truth in it.
It's truth. There's a lot of truth, but then like it's your choice if you wanted to dwell in that, and I just didn't want to.
Yeah, well, it's that thing where it's like, is it giving back more than it's taking? And when I reckon like if you're doing something and it is taking more than you're receiving, then it is time to put it over here for a little while and try something else because it'll always be there. But
to what you were saying about the being multidisciplinary, this is what it was all about because with design, what I love and hate about design is the amount of control you have over it.
Yeah.
You can be super meticulous and you could refine and keep on refining, and the client's not going to see it until it's perfect.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least as perfect as you can get it till that deadline. Because for sure you can go back and keep on tweaking and tweaking. We're talking fucking pixels, man. Like the littlest, slightest adjustment in the angles, you can keep on refining it that way.
There's a James Cameron quote that I've always loved, which is a project, like in his context, it's like a film is never finished, it's abandoned. Yeah,
like that. So that's what I appreciated about design. But when you take it too far, then that's when that perfectionism comes in, and the perfectionism is just inadequacy in disguise, right?
Well, that I think like what you've described, I attribute like the same thing to when I'm working on personal work, like which is why like the way I've always approached it is like I kind of cheat it. So the like I try to put as much of my experimentation as I can and like into whatever I'm working on, and that's what the art, like that was what was great about the art stuff, because it didn't have to be one thing, and there was never going to be like the answer to the brief or the answer to what the project needed was never going to be the same thing twice. And like I began to say before, is like can't do photography every time, and that's when I started doing more illustrative covers and things like that. And that was partially to do with managing time, but it was also trying to develop skills and like have things feed each other. And I never really made time to do stuff independently of my practice. It was always fed through that, and I found it wasn't until much later in my career I started making time to do it in particular. And even a good example is probably like a few years ago when I moved to Adelaide, the first year I was there, because like I was only doing music industry stuff at that time, and 2021 was a notoriously fucking shit year for the music industry. There was just nothing going on. So I had an abundance of time, like just to kind of experiment and do shit like that. So I just gave myself heaps and heaps of personal projects, which is really good. Like I got to experiment heaps. I got to try a bunch of different techniques, like mostly digital, but like I got to try a bunch of different techniques that I had always wanted to try, and I hadn't really had the opportunity to, but then I just never finished them because I didn't have the guardrails or especially like I didn't have a deadline. It's like I found like if I'm giving myself something to do just for myself, I am not thinking about.
But isn't that going to be okay?
It needs
though?
to be done this time.
I mean, like just the whole experimentation is just for the experimental sake, right? Like
Yeah.
having to finish it when, like, is there really going to be a finish to these as well?
Well, I think that's sort of also where the deadline sort of thing comes in, and it took me a while like to figure this out just with my own psychology as well. Is that the like having the deadline gives me a I need to have this done by this date, so I can experiment within the confines of this allotted time, but this needs to be done by then. So when I'm doing something for myself, I'm not giving myself a deadline. It's open-ended, and then I eventually reach a point where I just start focusing in so granular on things that really only matter to me. But that's also part of it. It's therapeutic, and that's where I get the exploration in. But it's sort of without allowing myself time previously to just do things without the need to present them to a client or just to even put it just out into the world on the internet. It just became it wasn't giving me the same thing.
By posting work just for the sake of posting it, I think then that helps bridge that, and that's what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah,
because with like Future History, I had no idea what this is actually meant to be about, and what I found was that it's becoming quite stifling.
Yeah, right.
Because I kind of just, like, for example, starting off, created these parameters saying that, okay, you're going to record and you create your processes. So just ironically, the last episode that was released, speaking with an illustrator, and one of the takeaways I got from that, which I believe and I still hold true, is that, you got to develop your processes.
Yeah.
But counter to that is that once you start developing your processes, if you're too rigid with your processes, then it can become quite stifling with your work and with your art.
Oh, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes, or a lot of the times, you have to break away. So, with this, I have my processes and say that, X number of posts per episode, drop this, then this, and then this. It works sequentially, and then on to the next one. But then I'm like, I want to create work because I'm getting inspired by all the guests that are coming on, and
I can imagine so.
Those conversations alone are just shifting the way I'm thinking about my work and shifting how the relationship I have with art. Like, if not for this, I wouldn't be painting again.
Yeah,
so how do I start showcasing it? Then it was just more like, just share it. Just share it.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Just create something and just share it. And then now I'm thinking, all right, I've got to do this at least weekly.
Yeah.
Just to keep me accountable and just to keep that muscle, just to help develop that particular muscle. And it doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad, people engage with it. It doesn't matter. The point of it is to create. That was
completely. Like, have you ever flirted with the idea of doing one of those like piece a day projects?
Not a pizza day. I can't do that. I mean, look, fuck. I don't want to say
like
I can't.
piece a week,
can.
like just like an ongoing thing that's just like this is an experiment that I'm going to do for X amount of time.
I have considered doing that, and this is sort of what I'm doing without giving it that label, because I don't want to pigeonhole it. I don't want to have to. If I want to do more, I'll do more. If I do less, I'll do less. But I'm just going to try to do it on the regular. Like I've had a couple of guests on that have gained a lot of personal achievement from that, but also it was a massive catalyst for their success. Like, for example, Justin Maller.
I was gonna ask if it was Justin. Yeah,
he was Facets project. The Facets project.
That was crazy fucking good too.
That was really good, and that not only just changed things for him, it changed the game, right? Like, it came at a time, and firstly in digital art, it set a particular aesthetic that a lot of people ran with, and it became a thing. It became an aesthetic.
Yeah, totally.
It came at a time when social media, Instagram, was still in its somewhat infancy, where it worked very differently to how it was now.
Oh yeah, it was a different beast then,
it was a different beast,
yeah.
And he just gained his notoriety through that, through creating Facets. But also another artist.
I remember Karan Singh was doing something similar. He was another depthcore guy as well.
Oh, was he in depthcore?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, his stuff's great.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, it's beautiful, his work.
And he's at different like eras of like stylistic
okay,
things as well, which is really cool.
He just evolved as well.
Yeah.
I guess his thing has always been colour.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't, something I've just never understood is like I admire the discipline but I've never been able to understand people who can just do one style forever. Like I know, and that's something
This is what I want to talk to you about as well.
God, yeah.
Because this is the thing about like the whole multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
And even like I don't even like the idea of labeling or pigeonholing. So you say design and illustrator, and I would use those labels just so it's easier for people to digest.
Yeah.
But then within each of those categories, there's this spectrum. There's a whole gamut, and then
spectrum.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was hard for me to grapple earlier on. And to what we were saying earlier on, when you have these artists that you look up to and they have one particular style that they have perfected and refined over their lifetime. And when they evolve, it's just in little micro bits. There's never any huge leaps in their work. It's just little tweaks here and there.
I think it depends what you're taking away from it, though. Like,
okay.
They're like, say, like going back to like you were talking about like Ken and Dan before, and like like I said, I've been like fans of theirs for a long time, and like I've been following their work long enough to see the different things and different like what I would. I kind of like, I don't know, I would guess at where they're pulling from, like where their influence is coming from at the time. Whereas like say like Ken in particular, like the way that he presents his line work, the way that he does his volumetric shading, like that's changed drastically from like when I first discovered his work when I was studying, and it was like on gig posts and stuff. And like same thing with Dan, like his work now looks nothing like what it did in like when he started out. It was a lot like the genesis, so the core of it is still present in both. Like just using those two artists as an example, the core of what makes those guys, what makes their art is still there. Like the finesse and the execution has changed over time.
Okay, I can see that. It's definitely become more refined. Even with Ken's work, I can see a change in the composition.
Yeah.
More so than the style or the technique. But no, look, I think it's not. I'm not trying to. It's by no means trying to sell them their creativity short by saying that they're not evolving.
No,
of course they are.
No, yeah.
But it's more like that they have established something and have nailed it, and the leaders of that particular pack.
Well, that like you just named two digital illustrators who just like spawned. Like
they set a precedent, right?
Like they had several generations of digital artists to follow.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And
there's another really interesting example of an illustrator from a similar circle. There's this guy Randy Ortiz, if I remember correctly. So I'm pretty sure that's his name. But he started out, if I remember right, I discovered his work like through like t-shirts or like band t-shirts, gig posters, things like that. But he used to do more like, I would almost call it closer to like by comparison, like comic artwork. So it's like, like key lines and things like that. And there's still like little bits of volumetric shading, but it was like kind of based more around like the screen printing discipline, and based more around like limited palette and sort of trying to manipulate that. And then I remember there was a Goonies poster he did, which was fantastic, like for Mondo. And I remember reading something once is like, so he just seemed to just sort of go away for a while, and he came back and he was just doing these immaculate like graphite drawings, and it's like almost completely different style. And if I remember the story correctly, it was like they were trying to put together a book for Mondo, and they were like, oh, we want to put these pieces in there. He's like, nah. I want any of my old work associated with it. This is what I do now. Like, this is what I do now.
Like a Picasso.
Well, I'd be very interested to find out, like, it's the sort of thing it was like, if I were ever to encounter this person and have a beer with them, and I'd be like, fucking dork about it and be like, how did you go from there to there? Like, what made you go, nah, we're putting this over here now, and I want to experiment, like, through the process of experimentation to find something else that you enjoy, that you just kind of go, like this is where I want to live now. Like I want to. I find it very interesting to see. I would be very interested to find out like what that transformation entailed.
So where do you sit on that when you have you yourself as someone who parlays in so many visual disciplines? What's your process, or what's your take on either just like sitting on something and really trying to master that, or just to bring that in and bank that into, you know, your bag of tricks?
Yeah. I think like for me, it's been like, firstly, I think it took me a long time. Well, not a long time. It took me a certain amount of time to come to terms with that it was okay for me to not want to just do one thing. Because the outside world at that point in time, like when I was younger and it was earlier in my career, was very much telling me differently. It was like, no, you can only be a designer, you can only be an illustrator, you can only be this. You have to pick one. You can't be all things. And my attitude was very much, fuck you, I'm doing it anyway. And the album art provided me the opportunity to do that. But when it comes to like the process part, like what's that look like? It kind of all looks the same. It's weird. It only looks different if it's just illustration. If it's just illustration, I find that it's like, it's kind of it's a strange sensation to describe because it's more of a feeling, and it's very much more like, it does feel more like being a fucking goblin, like hunched over and just sort of like there is only this, like there's this bubble here and you're just drawing within this bubble, and like my mind will very much only exist in this space. And I find that when I'm doing it as well, I have to get up and down and move around fucking constantly. So like, yeah, like the cigarette thing is a pain in the ass in that regard. Like I will chain smoke while I'm doing illustrations, and it's because I'm like using my mind in a different sort of way, and it requires it's what's the best way to articulate it? I think it is like, if you can imagine like trying to get a team of sled dogs to settle and pick a fucking direction. Like they're not all tied to just like the same two ropes. So we're going that way. It's like not. It's more like, yeah, like that picture of Daniel Radcliffe like smoking a cigarette and just like there's dogs everywhere. It's like trying to get my mind to focus just on the illustration is a little bit like that. It's like they're all attached to my hip and I'm going like that. They're like and so like I think that's sort of the way that my mind specifically operates, is it sort of creates this little bubble around it. Whereas if I'm doing other stuff, like if I'm doing something that's a little bit more like conceptual, or if I'm doing I'm doing something even away from the screen or away from an illustration, that it's a very different sensation as well. Like it feels like that bubble's gone and you can see past the borders, and it allows a lot of different things in as well. It was something I've really enjoyed specifically when I was doing the I don't know if you saw it. It was the cover art I did for I Built the Sky. It's like a diorama of like a little sort of cabin in a briefcase. No,
go on.
Yeah, I'm glad I brought it up.
I'll have a look later.
But yeah, no, that was like I made a miniature, like a diorama of this little mossy cabin, and like it was just whimsical and fun and shit like that. Like but the idea conceptually was it was just like it was very literal for the title of the record, because it's an instrumental project for this guy Roy Stevens, who's like enormously talented. But he wrote it during COVID, and so it was kind of, like, fuck it, we'll just lean into it. It doesn't, like, it's not going to take on that meaning of being stuck in ISO forever. It's going to become its own thing after time. So that's why we went with that concept. But, like, to make it, it was like, like we did the conceptual stuff, we did sketches, and I was doing the research, and then Ro and I settled on that direction. And the basis of it was like, we'll just create this little universe, and it's literally like you and your wife and your dogs. Like, this is where you were living at the time, and the whole point of it was you were creating an escape. So let's present that. And it's and it's 12 images in sequence that like arranged to look like the transition of like morning through evening and there like there and back again. And to make it I actually like made the miniature out of like recycled junk, like
Cool.
like just like fucking cereal boxes, popsicle sticks, bits of like sushi packets and containers, but like doing so like part of it is doing that, like finding all the bits and pieces and then just learning how to do that and experimenting with doing that and how to do those little miniature bits. But then at the same time, I'm also trying to figure out, I'm like looking for locations where we can shoot like the background imagery for the forests and like details that are going to go into there. And like I was living in South Australia at the time, so that was done over there. I made the model over there. Ro was like, you guys were still still in the second long dark. But you know, like when we're all allowed out to play again, I came back over and I drove the model over and we shot the model here with Ro, his family, and the one of the photographers I work with, Dan Anderson. Like we shot it there and got all those bits and pieces, and then I went back to South Australia and I shot the backgrounds over there and some of the like forest reserves and that, and then it all came together. But anyway, through my fucking ramble of this, the thing that I guess I'm trying to articulate is that felt completely different. Like it is very much a physical sensation, like the point of difference between doing those things. And I think that's something I've been chasing more again lately. It's like do you find you get the same sort of thing with like when you're working on like say something like really focused and clean, like in the design sense, versus like when you are doing something very physical and more emotional, like when you're doing the painting?
Completely.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I've gone back and trying to dabble with painting.
Yeah.
Is the resignation of not trying to maintain control.
Yeah.
And that was what I was getting at earlier, was that design, you can be really meticulous with it, whereas painting, I feel as though that you're at the mercy a lot of the tools. You can try to control what you're doing, and of course you're going to develop those skills, those techniques, but there's no undo. You can go over it again. But everything that you do, it's a constant moving forward, right? Whereas like with design, there's Control Z. You can and I like
the same thing with the digital illustration as well, which is like probably my biggest enemy. Like it's self-imposed. Like I will obsess over clean lines, like
of course
an unhealthy amount.
I hear you, man, and I think that's what I appreciate from painting is relinquishing that control. I try to. So I was even just thinking, like, what am I actually trying to do from here? Because I've like kind of just squatted this. It's a midlife crisis, right? Yeah. This whole fucking situation is a big time midlife crisis. Like, started.
I can relate, obviously.
Yeah, you know. So the whole. To give you some context, this podcast started off from me wanting to have conversations with people like yourself.
Yeah, like find your community again.
Yep, to just be amongst my people, just to find my people, because that was one of the things that I was missing. Is that I've just been so stubborn in the way that I navigated my career. I basically just isolated myself, because every time I saw someone who I would that I should be taking inspiration from, it was always like, fuck that guy. Right?
Like more competitive.
Yeah. Wrong attitude.
I think everyone's going to have phases like that, though. Like, no, I don't think anyone is immune from that.
I have 40 years of it, man. Yeah. So it was quite a phase. So then it was like, there's actually a lot that you can gain from sitting down and having conversations with these people who are doing the thing that I wish I had done. So there was that, okay, let's just turn it around and try to. I
sincerely hope the lesson that you're taking from it is I want to do everything.
That's the thing, right? Yeah. Like, because it kind of just ebbs and flows, because now you take so many different lessons, and some of it is like, stay disciplined and stay disciplined to what you're doing. And I believe in that. I think that there is a degree of having to be resilient and endure, right? And just keep going.
Of course, yeah.
But then there's also that open-mindedness just to think that to allow things to come in as well, instead of just having to surge this way, allow things to come in. And because you're not necessarily going that way, you're going this, that, left, right, things are going to deviate off course, and just be more open to that.
Yeah. Oh, dude, yeah, I totally get you. And like we kind of almost touched on this a couple of times, like just earlier. But like I think like one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the years is that this, like, we're creatives, like this is supposed to be play.
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be fun. And if it's not fun, then why the fuck are we doing it? Like, I get it. If you want to do, like, you know, be a creative for a job, that's fine. Like, you know, treat it like a job. That's totally fine. But I'm not wired that way. So I think, and I have been very spoiled in the sense that over the course of my career, I've been surrounded by people, like a lot of like really cool, really talented people, but they have also kind of, without realizing it, have enabled me to play for a profession. Like that's kind of the way I look at it.
That comes in with the industries that you've parlayed in as well, because when you're in the music industry, especially, you know, when you're like alternative music, by definition,
the angry music. Why are you always shouting?
By definition, you're trying to go against the grain of what is popular, right? Like that's just at the foundation of it.
Yeah.
So experimentation is encouraged. There are people that need to have restrictions and limitations, right? Just to be able to guide them. I mean, imagine just getting in.
Telling you about the sled dog thing before.
Yeah. And, you know, there's pros and cons to it all, man. And so what I see with your work is take away the finished product, take away the visual component of it. Conceptually, I think that's where, at the genesis, that's where you start off with, right? And I think that's your strength.
Oh, thank you very much.
Right,
That's quite the compliment. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the execution is top notch, but I think more than anything, that's why it's transferable across all of it, because it's just the way you come up with these ideas. It's not in a superficial sense. There's depth to it, and you're able to then just kind of like take this brief and then kind of consider, like, oh, what if we took it here and then move it here and then just try this little thing and add this ingredient, and all of a sudden, and that's the thing, right? Like conceptually, you've been in this groove to always challenge challenge the surface level of it.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, like without knowing what it was, like, you know, initially, I think I've always been allergic to being presented with a bad idea. Be like, oh, like if I'm like, I think the attitude I always took was if somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, we like what you do, but we want you to do this sort of thing, or we have this idea, and if I'm not particularly fond of it, it has to be really bad for me to go, no, we're not doing that. But I think the way that I've always approached that is there's a reason why this person is coming to me and saying this is important to me. And so I think the thing, and I didn't pick up on this until I started doing the advertising stuff, because I did award school in like 2017, doesn't matter. Anyway, around then, I didn't pick up on it until I started doing the award school. Like, like advertising places such a premium on idea before everything, which is like, which is, you know, great. Like, but like I think the reason why that was the hardest thing I've ever done, by the way, was award school. It was like having to like physically rewire your brain.
Just apply a bit of rationale and objectivity to your eccentricity.
What was absolutely, I think that's probably the best way to put it, is like, like how do you chain the dogs, dude? Like, but it was also like, it was rewarding in the end, because like by the time when I figured out how to connect the correct wires, it was because of what we were just talking about, through trying to understand why somebody wants to present a certain thing, and then figuring out how can we extract something else from it, or something that's unexpected. Or trying to, and I think again, like it is sort of like, especially if you're working with musicians, like it's a, you know, it's a physical expression, it's emotional expression, and if it like say if a musician comes to you and they're like, we want like somebody with their back to the camera standing on a cliff or something like that. Like it's like, I don't necessarily think that's a great idea, but why do we want to do that? Okay, cool. We want to express a certain vulnerability or a certain emotional state. And it's like, okay, well, like, how do we turn that into a story, or how do we communicate that in an unexpected way? And that's a fun challenge. And through doing that process, that's also where you get to go and you approach it. If you approach it through the lens of, I don't have to answer this question through one discipline, it just opens up so many different doors, and then it provides that opportunity to play as well. And I think that's where I learned it from. It's like literally just working with musicians and like being a former, a failed musician myself. Like I just sort of I had a shortcut because I already came from that world, so I understood where the people I was working with was coming from. We all shared interests and passions and things like that. So, but like being exposed to that early on is sort of what led to being able, like what very nice compliment that you were paying me about, being able to pull a concept or look for the core of something and then go, okay, now that's what we're looking at. How do we attack it?
Yeah, that's where it ultimately has to stem from, right? It's just understanding the layers, the why, and trying to get down to that. Because even with brand design, and tell me if this is something that you've experienced, is that the client will come to you and they'll say that this is what we want, as in they give you the brief, and then they'll also come with examples, and this is what we like. And they don't marry up at all.
That's part of the process, though. That's a very design that's a procedural thing, I think. To me, like, because everyone gets that. I get that all the time. Like, as a matter of fact, like usually their first port of call, if somebody comes to me without references, I send them away. I just be like, nah, go, like, not, that sounded like fuck off. It wasn't meant to. No, it's like, I won't, like, if somebody comes to me without references or without, like they're like, oh, we've got a vague idea of something. It'd be like, I'll go, all right, look, all right, let's chat. We'll do let's do our intro chat. Let's sort of discuss everything in the broad strokes. And through the process of that discussion, you begin to narrow down, you begin to start picking a direction. And so what I always do is I'll have that initial discussion with people, and then I'll be like, all right, look, so the next part of the process for me is I'm going to go away, rummage through my drawers and like find my bits and pieces and references, and like I might do some like experimentation R&D or whatever, just to try to find something that I'm like, all right, I think this is the way we should go. But while I'm doing that, I want you to go away and just make some time to just find shit you like find some stuff that you like. Especially if it's somebody that doesn't quite know what they want visually, because that's always the biggest frustration for any designer, anyone working with any client, is I don't know what I'll like until I see it.
But that's entirely true. That's usually the case as well.
Yeah, like it is, but like I think that's sort of the thing. One of the ways I figured out to circumvent it over the years is you gotta figure out, because it's like when you're producing something, you're going to be the most happy with the result if it's something that excites you and it's something you're proud of.
I strongly discourage clients from trying to pull visual inspiration, branding wise. I only because you only know what you know. Well,
that's part of the education with them, right? Like it's good to say. So like to clarify, like when I say go away and find some stuff that you like and show me. It doesn't necessarily have to be a brand. Like that is obviously part of a discovery, like most discovery conversations is going to be like, where have you drawn inspiration, or what did you see that sort of sparked this idea for you, like this venture, this whatever it is that you're working on together. Like
I try to keep the mood board strictly as a mood board. It's just meant to evoke sentiment. So I'm happy. I actually encourage that.
Yeah.
Grab some visual imagery that conveys the emotion that you want to get out of your brand.
Yeah, right.
And
How does that look sometimes? Like, what was it like, or like, what was the last thing the Celtic Fox one? Yeah, because that looked, like I said before, and I'll say it for the camera now. Like, it looked fucking. I loved that. I thought it was fantastic.
I'll show you the finished
as a professional, an accidental professional scrutineer of all things Fox related, thanks to like many years of Christmas presents.
No, I appreciate that. I'll show you the finished the finished product.
Yeah,
after.
please do, man.
But no, so they came already with a mood board. So this is a great example. They didn't have any visual cues set. They have environments and sceneries that they wanted to represent. A lot of the flora and fauna, I suppose.
Yeah.
And some colors that evoked that sentiment that they wanted to convey. So that's where we started off. And then what I would do with that is then to start picking it apart, trying to marry things up. And the color palette changed slightly because then it was a matter of, okay, if you want this particular color, then you need this to complement and then this to match. And you have to start adjusting.
And that's where your expertise starts coming into play. Yeah.
And like they were completely on board with everything that I was communicating to them. But I suppose that what I would appreciate from a client is the freedom to create the visual elements, but what's encouraged for them to bring to the table is visual cues that elicit the emotion. Like if you want to have a brand that conveys the feeling that you have when you crack open a beer after, right?
Fucking VB, mate.
That's it, right? And then when you have that emotion, you can already start drawing and linking up the connotations between this visual cue, this color palette, this shape, and so it's basically. I just see,
It's funny how different of a beast it is when you're like this exact conversation we're having right now, just sort of about, because I was very curious to see what you had to say on it, because like I think I mentioned to you, like I've mostly been doing like branding work for the last 12 months. And it did take me a little while. Like I've been doing branding work for fucking ever, but I've been focusing on it more for the last 12 months. And a pushback that I found was like, trying to figure out how to get to a point where it's like, okay, we're on the same page. And like you touched on something really interesting then, whereas like it's sort of, you're trying to reach a place where you're marrying something emotionally and logically. And like through you saying that, then I was just like, oh shit, like that's something I didn't actually realize that I had a shortcut on with the music stuff, because it begins with me being presented with something
here's
emotional.
The brief.
Yeah. Well, not even that. It's like, here's the music.
Well, that's the brief, right? Here's the music.
Yeah.
Now, what does it make you feel? Create an image for that.
Yeah, and that's like that's a fun challenge when it comes to branding as well. So it's like, how do you like is going like, oh, like what? How do we want people to feel when they see this or when they interact with this product or things like that?
Yeah,
I think that's why I've been loving the hospo stuff as well lately. It's sort of at its core, it's giving an experience.
Oh, dude, hospitality. There's so many layers to brand experience in that. With your clients, can you please emphasize the importance of waiting staff and not me getting on a fucking app to order my food and drink?
I can happily say that the experiences I've had in that world so far, I would not have to tell them that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I've been lucky with that so far. Like,
if they're all about the branded experience, and it seems like the clients that you're working with, that is what they're all about, is creating an atmosphere and something that's going to be conducive to their clients experiencing the food how they want to experience. It's
Absolutely.
It's not even a culinary experience. It's a whole body experience, right? And
it's an event.
It's an event. It's an event, yeah. So that's my little, old man yells at cloud.
Yeah, we got plenty of that today. I totally get that. Hey, and like I think that's been the draw of that stuff to me as well. Is like I can see a direct. There is a direct emotional link between like everything like the existence that I had in the music world, like especially like like doing like the festivals and stuff, like the best lesson that anyone I've ever worked with has ever imparted on me was my art director when I first started Soundwave, Dave. So he pulled me aside one day, like when we were actually like on grounds at the festival, and he just sort of like I was like very much like kind of in my own head, like, oh shit, I have to go from here to there. I have to get this stuff done. I got to update timetables and like social. I got to send this to print, like fucking for the sideshows. And he just sort of, I was kind of in a tizzy, and he just sort of grabbed me and pulled me aside, like away from everything, and sat me down. Like he's like, sit down here, have a ciggy with me, and just fucking look out there. And we were sitting in, I think we were in Perth at the time, and we were sort of sitting on this hill where we could just see the main stage, and it was like 50,000 people or something like that, just having a good time. And it was like, this is why we do this stuff, because it creates this for other people. It's like, we do this because it satisfies us creatively, it caters to our interest in that. But like really the coolest thing that we get out of it is that we get to help create an experience for people that brings joy, or that brings, like, introduces them to new things, new people, stuff like that. And there is like, I can draw, like, through my limited experience thus far, like just with the hospital world, like there is a direct link between that, like that tenet, and going to a pub, going to a bar, going to get food, like, and like all the little bits and pieces that help shape that. It's like, it is like kind of conducting the orchestra in that way as well.
It helps the creative just strip away that ego, that ultimately what you're doing is the service of something else.
Which is, it's funny you say that, because what I just said could easily be mistaken for being egotistical.
No, but you know what I mean, that what you're doing, or what all visual artists are doing, especially with more graphic design, is that you are creating something for the benefit of something else.
Yeah.
And for the most part, like if you're talking about like graphic design, it's there to communicate something, right? It's to communicate something and to evoke some kind of, there's an objective behind it.
Yeah.
So it's not even for you, it is for the end user of that.
Yeah.
So you just have to appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like,
but then with art is throw in as much ego as you want.
Yeah. Pure fucking ego. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not for them.
Yeah. I think like that'll be like that's something I've been trying to separate a little bit more lately, has been especially the last few years, has been trying to separate like practice from art and making that time. And like we were saying before, like just sort of going, like realizing what the guardrails I need to put in place are simply just like, no, nobody gets to see this. This is just for me. Like, and like that. And
do you have that?
Yeah. There's like there's like, I've never drawn just for fun ever. Yeah. It's always been, I think, especially because for the better part of the 15 years that I've been doing what I do, I've worked for myself. And like, I've contracted, and I've been full-time once or twice in a few places, but for the most part, it's always been through like me or my moniker, my former moniker. So it was always very much a case of this creativity exists within, the hours of like, there were no, I work for myself. There are no set working hours at all. But like at the time is when I started as well, I was still playing music. And for a long time, like probably, I think it was like maybe the first 5-6 years, like I was still playing music regularly. So I had that outlet, like that was my art.
Yeah.
And only recently have I realized that was the point of difference. And it was like when something starts, when this thing over here is taking more than it's giving, then I would, without realizing it, I would subconsciously start playing more music, and I would start writing a lot of music as well, because I've always played guitar. I've played guitar since I was like 11, but I played drums in bands. But guitar's always been like just for me. Like my guitar sits next to my desk most of the time. Like it just sits there, and like if it's in place of placing, I might just pick it up and just have a noodle and something.
I think that's important, man. Yeah, to break that train of thought.
Yeah. And I think like that's sort of been my biggest takeaway, and that's sort of also been why I don't feel bad that I've never done art just for fun, or like it's all fun. And like I said before, like the biggest thing that I've tried to achieve over the years is to maintain a sense of play. But it's like art takes on various forms. It's not like this. It's not just this. It's playing guitar and just writing music, or like playing drums, and like
Stripping away labels.
that's always been more the art side, I think, in my adult life.
For sure, man. And yeah, to that, like just removing labels and limitations does allow more freedom to create as well. And if you do, once you're able to then come to terms with the fact that, like, if you're at the core, if you're going to call yourself a graphic designer or an illustrator, I think by virtue of that, you're already putting limitations to what your capabilities are.
Yeah, I've always thought of that as being a that's for them thing, like them as in people who are trying to figure out what pigeonhole to put me in. So that comes up, as you can imagine, it comes up quite a lot. And I've had numerous people like I've spoken to over the years have recommended that I separate my practices in that regard. It's like, you should have one website for your design work and you should have one website for your illustration work. And it's like, I understand the virtue in that, but you're kind of looking through that of the point of, through the lens of like, I need to be able to sell you in some way, or like I need to be able to sell you to other people in some way. Whereas it doesn't necessarily need to be that.
I don't think so.
Like, if people ask me what I am, I just go, oh, I'm just a fucking art director. Like, yeah.
I don't think so, because then by doing that, you're competing in two different spaces as well, rather than leaning into what makes you uniquely you.
Yeah, and it took me a while to come to peace with that. Like, going, no, the thing that makes me is this. Like the fact that I fuck around in all these different areas. Like, that's the thing that makes me unique.
Yeah, like having that, just a different avenue to explore.
Yeah.
And to really resign to the process more than anything. Just the process of discovery, rather than trying to, not looking for anything final. Yeah. But rather than, it's just more about throwing yourself into that process and of seeing what can come of this.
Yeah. I think that's where I've always gotten the music. The outlet's always been music. Like, logically, it's why it's always been that. Because like when I was playing in bands, we were room musicians. Like, is probably the best way to put it. We wrote everything in the room, and we just sort of, like, people would come in with like ideas of bits and bobs, or they'd just be stuffing around like a piece of, like, a riff or a piece of a song or something like that, and we'd just sort of jam and figure it out that way. And it was always, and so that's sort of where I got that fulfillment of just fucking around and like going, like, piecing something coming together like that. And I still get that when I pick up the guitar, and like, that's so much why I keep it next to the desk as well, because like I got like folders full of shit that I've like demoed or recorded. Like, I did it's like, and it's all different things as well. Like, sometimes I want to play like twinkly Midwest emo, and sometimes I want to write like just dank fucking stoner metal. Like, like, none of it's the same, and doesn't have to be. It's sort of more just going, what do I feel like doing at the time, and what's going to come out, and just sort of like fucking around until something comes out. And that's probably why I've always kept it over here. It's like I do miss playing music. I've actually been jamming again recently for the first time in years, like and like thoroughly enjoying that. But I also, at the same time, it's not, I have always loved that it's like, this is something that exists over here just for me. And every now and then I'll be like, I'll put something online, like on my personal account, usually not on my art account. There is a song there was something I was messing around with over lockdowns, like, where I was writing a lot of heavier stuff, and Ro and I were working together on that the Diorama record. And he helped me record it later, and like did a little guesty solo on it. And it's like, the brief I gave him was like, all right, so just think Top Gun, like the guitars from Top Gun, just like shred and
cool
most triumphant. Like, and it comes up every now and then. I'm like, man, I should really just put that out on the internet. Be like, here's something from like 3-4 years ago that was just done for fun. Like,
no, I'm a big fan of creatives that have both the audacity and the courage just to create and just to find different avenues. I think that's important. So I think that was probably the best takeaway, and that's something that I should have maybe have shared with those kids, was that at the core of it all is to create, to break free of any of those limitations and those boundaries and the labels, because once you have the freedom to do that, then you can find different areas that bucket that you can put in those buckets. That if you need to limit it, you need to restrict it, then you can. But you firstly have to be able to break out from that.
Totally. And like when you do find that little nugget, the coolest thing that I've found over the years as well is that if you find something and you are getting like genuine enjoyment out of it as well, it becomes a fucking awesome funnel. Like everything else, all your other interests just start feeding into this thing, and it starts giving it more. It's like, yeah, and
it works the other way. It starts giving that more, and then it starts giving back to you that you're able to then put
I think
back out there.
That's more what I was referring to. Like it's giving, like, because I am completely incapable of separating art from myself. Like they're one and the same thing.
100%,
so, yeah.
and that's probably ultimately what it is, right? Like once you start letting go and creating for the sake of creating, and then it's going to be poured back into you, then there is that symbiotic kind of relationship you have with creating, that it just becomes part of you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And then that's the post that I put up today. I was like, you chose creativity
I saw
chose
that.
you.
Yeah.
And I believe that. But, you know, that the experiences that you gain is for the purpose of you then to be able to create and to realize something to put back out in the world that someone else or yourself is going to be pulling back in.
Oh, dude, yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So what's happening now? What's going on in Pat Fox's world?
In Pat land? Shit. Oh, like, yeah, I guess like coming up, there's there's that record that I'm starting on at the moment. So that's for a young band from Nebraska in the States called Beyond the World Ahead. That one, I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be really fun. I won't say too much about what I'm cooking up for that conceptually, just because it is subject to change.
Cool.
But yeah, like we've locked in like, you know, most of what it's going to be, and like also like part of the all right, here's what I'm thinking, go away and find some stuff that you like as well, I was like, go away and find stuff that you like, but also go find stuff of mine specifically and be like, tell me which of this idiot you want. Which spectrum would you like? But yeah, and I got that coming up. Then some more like hospo branding, which would be really fun. So like I just wrapped up that one for the new pub down in Richmond. There's a couple more things on the horizon at the moment, which should be really cool. And yeah, and then like to be perfectly honest with you, man, like the thing that I've been trying to make more time for again is music. Like
cool.
just doing that, like because you know, like I was saying before, like that. Just I think it had been too long since since music was really like every single day part of my life, or if I realized it had been too long. So I've been trying to make more time for that, because I think I came to a realization that was like, when I am allowing myself to go from one thing to the other, it is making my just experience creatively, it is enriching it beyond measure. Like the things that come out when I have a balance of going from my professional creativity to like the music side, like just playing music and fucking around, the things that come out are significantly better, and more importantly, I'm happier. That's and it was something I realized many years ago, and that was why I started putting the fucking guitar nearby, and then it just sort of sat in a box for too long, and now I've been doing it again. I'm just like, oh, I'm way happier when I do this. Like. But like honestly, that's the thing I'm trying to make more time for at the moment.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome, man. I'm gonna try to find what my guitar is. I'm not musically inclined, so I'll need to find something else.
Yeah,
could be video games, but There's more frustration and angst with that. So
That's a big. If you open that door, I'm walking through it, man. I'll talk about video games till the cows come home. That's something if I could pick anything to do, I would love to make video games. I've wanted to do that for years, but I have no 3D chops to speak of.
Yeah, that's a whole different beast, and I think that there's a lot more bureaucracy and red tape when it comes to that.
It's
world.
like that with everything, though. Like I think I think you do with things that you enjoy. You do have to pick a point where you choose not to lift the veil. So like my brother Dan, he works in video games, and he's one of the most fucking intelligent, talented people you'll ever meet. Like he's the guy. So Dan's the one that wrote the short film that my brothers and I did. So like Dan wrote it, co-directed it with my second youngest brother Sean, and then we all did that together. But Dan mostly makes a living doing like animation in video games, and like so I've been able to see like how the sausage is made over the years, and it's never discouraged me once. It's like, it actually just makes it look cooler.
That's a good point, man. That's a good point. That's something that I never really considered when it comes to picking your professional avenues. Is that you do have to consider, look deeply at it, try to see it from every angle, and ask yourself, how deep are you willing to go, and how much are you willing to devote to it? Because it will get to a point where things could get ugly, things could be challenging. Do you love it enough to want to do that, or do you want to just keep it as a hobby?
Yeah, I think those things, like you're not only allowed to have those things, but you should. Like I think it's a very healthy thing to. Like there is a limit to wanting to do everything. Like
absolutely, absolutely.
But be careful with the video game door. Like I said, if you open it, I will run through. Like
we'll save that for another episode, because there's going to be a bunch of stuff that you have coming up that we should talk about once they wrap up too.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be very cool. Yeah.
Pat Fox, thank you so much for this conversation, mate.
Yeah, thanks heaps, man. There we go. Over the mic. Yeah. Yeah, thanks heaps, man. This is really cool.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
No, thanks, mate.